Welcome back to Inside the Game with CNHI Sports. I'm George Bremer of CNHI Sports Indiana, and we're going to take you around the country to cover some of the biggest headlines this week. Let's start in Boston with Bill Burt. Now it's time for our weekly spot with Bill Burt of CNHI Sports Boston. And Bill, it seems like there's three teams right now kind of a cut above everybody else in the NFL. What do you make of what Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and the New Orleans Saints have done so far this year?
Yeah, they're the three best teams. You could go any order, to be honest with you. New Orleans is sort of, you could argue New Orleans is the most sound team all the way around. The way they're playing without their quarterback, which is interesting, which is going to make it interesting when Breeze comes back. Not that Breeze won't play, but I think they're going to use Hill a lot more than they've used him before. And what it does is it takes a lot of time preparing for them. You're wasting a lot of time on the other quarterback, a second quarterback, on plays that might happen. So not an easy team, and they're tough defensively. They can run the ball. They got one of the best running backs in the league. So that team is interesting. Pittsburgh's undefeated, and we don't really talk about them with reverence like we do Kansas City. I believe Kansas City with Mahomes is just the team. And not just Mahomes, the offense. You got to give Andy Reid a lot of credit. That offense is tough to stop. So I'd say those three teams deservedly are in a cut above the rest.
And if you're looking at those three and you're trying to find somebody outside of that group who might rise up here in the next couple months, get to the Super Bowl, maybe win that game, hoist the Lombardi Trophy, who might you look at as a team that could be in that kind of a situation?
So on that realm, I believe this is a year we may have one of those teams winning a Super Bowl. Usually it's, the top two or three teams. It's rarely a surprise where the team wins a Super Bowl and you go, that team really isn't as good. I don't even know because I think you and I both, I'm going to go with Tennessee Titans. I think Tennessee Titans, only because they're not really, it's tough to call Tennessee sort of an underdog. They're legit. They made it to the AFC Championship a year ago. They basically finished. They may have finished the Ravens off the way they beat them in the postseason last year, and then pummeled them again this year. But there's something about that team, and I don't like their defense. Hasn't played great, but offensively, that running back, he's as good as it gets. There's a couple guys that are right there with him, but I just see, Ryan Tannehill protecting the football, 4 interceptions. That's unlike him. But when you don't ask a lot of a quarterback as much as maybe you do a Brady or per se, and play action is the best gift you can give a quarterback. That team is dangerous. And look, Mike Vrabel, I covered him as a player. I've covered him as a coach. He's a hard bleep. He's a tough guy. He's mouthy. He's crass. He's sarcastic. But his team plays hard for him. That's why I'm looking for them. I think they can go to Kansas City and win in Kansas City. And again, I don't want to disrespect Pittsburgh. I'm still not there yet with Pittsburgh, though they deserve to be in the top 3.
Yeah, and I think it's very unique to prepare for. You talked about Derrick Henry and everything that he brings to the table. You don't see a team like them every week in the NFL. I think the week that you play the Titans, it's a whole different situation. You've got to really – it's almost like preparing for an option team in college football. Obviously, they're not playing that style of football, but they run the ball so much. They're so physical with it. I think teams have to kind of prepare the same way they do in college. It's a whole different week. You got to kind of do a whole different set of discipline on defense. And obviously, Derrick Henry tends to play his best at the best time of year. We saw it last year in the playoffs. We're seeing it from him right now. These huge numbers that he's putting up, literally putting this team on his back and carrying them. If I had to pick a team, I would probably go with the Green Bay Packers, and it's all about Aaron Rodgers. Their defense, we know, has issues. They didn't come to pass this week because they played the Bears, and the Bears just don't have an offense right now to even worry about. But I think Green Bay in the playoffs is going to have to answer for that defense. But we've seen Aaron Rodgers before. When he gets red hot the way he is or appears to be right now, he can be very difficult to stop. I think Tony Dungy was right on Sunday night saying that it looked like the Bears defense had quit at some point during the game. but that is not the kind of defense you usually put 40 points up on. The Packers made it look easy. I think they can score on just about anybody in this league. If he gets hot, maybe they can make a run. But I still think it's that top three, that group that we just talked about, that really is in consideration for the Super Bowl.
Here's why I like your pick, because this is his year. He's playing MVP like at 37, which isn't a big deal anymore. 37 is the new 25, I guess. But he needs a Super Bowl. I hate to say it, and I said it before. Russell Wilson, he needs a Super Bowl. And when I say need, if they want to be all-time legendary great, in this era, it's about winning. I think we go back to like Dan Marino and we'll even say Ted Williams in baseball. Winning wasn't really, we didn't really define people by winning. That's a new phenomenon here the last 20 years. You win championships, and that's how we define you. This is it. I believe this is the last opportunity, because I think the league is getting better, especially in the NFC. I think it will be better. But this is it for Aaron Rodgers. And he's playing like an MVP. He's playing like one of the best players in the league. And he is. He's supremely talented. But he's got to win. So good luck to him beating New Orleans. Not going to be easy. And, we're not really talking about Tampa anymore after another disappointing performance there, which is a whole nother story. But I got to be honest with you. If he's on fire and he's got this little fire burning inside of him, that's gonna be interesting over there. A Green Bay Tennessee Super Bowl, wouldn't be surprised at all.
No, I would not be shocked by that. One thing that was surprising, I don't know, I've never seen this in the NFL. You've been around a little bit longer than I have, and I bet you haven't seen it either. When you look at what happened in Denver on Sunday with all three quarterbacks out, a practice squad wide receiver comes up. I've never seen anything like that. I think it was 1 for 9 for 12 yards is what you kind of expect for somebody who only played a little bit of quarterback in college. Have you ever seen anything even close to compare this to?
No. And look, it was bad luck because it was the quarterback room. They basically were all around each other. And I guess they've all tested negative, so they all could have played. Odd. But I'll say this. This year is different. For Denver, it's bad. Denver's not winning a Super Bowl. I will say they're interesting. I got to give that. I've seen every team that's played the Patriots and watched the tape of every game. Their defense really surprised. Probably was the toughest on Cam Newton that I've seen. And I got to give them credit. Offensively, they made some big plays. They dominated the game. Patriots still came back and could have won the game. But that's a team to watch in the future. But that being said, weird. This game is, the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game's weird. But we're just going to have to accept some weirdness. In the end, I think we're going to get who we want. And it's the big shots, the big coaches, the big salaries, the $30 million quarterbacks. That's what we're going to get when this is all said and done.
Yeah, you said that at the beginning of the year coming in. You said this is going to be a year where quarterbacks and coaches really drive things. And so far, you look at those top teams, New Orleans is probably the only one that's really breaking from that in that top three group. But they've obviously gotten good play from their quarterback as well. Yep. I think Sean Payton is obviously a huge part of that, so at least half that equation. The only other team I think that even doesn't perfectly fit that is Tennessee. And again, Mike Vrabel does, and I think Ryan Tannehill, they're getting enough out of him.
We're seeing the thing in Tennessee is we're just seeing they're managing the game. It's great. It's great coaching, I believe. They've gotten lucky a couple times. They've had bad luck against them. But they are here's what I've learned through my 30 years covering the Patriots, the last 20 years. The best Patriots teams were the toughest ones. They just were tough. Forget about, I think we fall in love with the Brady and the passing, but these teams were tough. This Tennessee team's got a toughness about them. And it's the way they run the ball. It's the way they commit to it. It's really they've taken the personality of their coach. That's why if you ask me, I think they're not the best team, but they're the team that scares me the most. And if I was making a pick, I'd sort of worm my way to get Tennessee beating Kansas City in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it would not surprise me. Obviously, I saw them up close and personal on Sunday. The Colts had their own issues with a lot of guys out with COVID. That's just part of 2020. But I don't know if it would have made a big difference. Derrick Henry would not be stopped on Sunday. Running through guys, it honestly looked like a high school game where you see one guy's the best player on the field and nobody else can even match up to him. That's the way that Derrick Henry made the NFL look on Sunday from my eyes.
So look, your team, the Colts, I'm very interested in them. I've sort of been on their bandwagon a little bit. And then for a while, you were at the game. I was checking the score from afar, going, they're gonna pull this off. Then it went against them, and then they had no chance against Henry. The game just got away from them. But they're another team. In this year, they're tough. Nobody's talking about them. Wouldn't be surprised if they went into a Pittsburgh first, whether it's this first or second round, and could beat a team like that. Can they run off 3 or 4 games? Well, they got a head coach that did it with Philadelphia, where he was very involved in the offense. So I wouldn't put. That's still a team I got to watch, but big month ahead for the Indianapolis Colts.
They got to get healthy. They missed Anthony Costanzo an awful lot in that game. They were hanging with Tennessee early. I thought it was going to be a whack game early. 14-14, both teams scored on each of their first 2 possessions. And then Costanzo went out with a knee injury, and we've seen in Indianapolis since he was drafted in 2011, when he's not there, they have a lot of trouble protecting the quarterback. Phillip Rivers, as you know, there's a lot of things he does well. Being mobile, being elusive is not one of them.
Right.
Too much pressure from Tennessee, and they couldn't handle it. But I think there's a lot coming up. I think it's going to be a really interesting final month. For one thing, we don't know. I mean, that Tennessee game changed tremendously during the week when it was revealed that DeForest Buckner had tested positive for the Colts. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, a huge defense tackle's not out there. We don't know how much is that going to be a part of this final month of the season. I know it's impossible to predict, but as we sit here now and you try to say this team's got an easy schedule, this team's got a difficult schedule, COVID's going to have a say in this too, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's the thing. We saw this. Let's go back to baseball. We compare it to baseball. Baseball had its early, then they had the middle season problem, and I'm more calling this a middle season problem for the NFL. But this is like when I think the teams and the league step up and say, all right, no more of this. We're going to start forfeiting games. This is on the teams. And look, the Patriots just lost Julian Edelman. He was supposed to be back possibly this week with COVID. So at some point, you got to put it on the teams. They know they have to be extra careful. And, these are tough times. We had Thanksgiving, Christmas is coming up. Families get together and they say, bag, I don't care what the rules are. I'm going to go with my family. Well, if you're with 6 or 7 people that you know, but when you have those 3 or 4 uncles where you don't know where they've been, and I got one of those, that's when you could get in trouble. So I think they're going to get it under control. I don't think the NFL wants to go to a week 18. They want to end this when they end it. And then if there's an issue, maybe play with the postseason. And I think that's where I know Roger Goodell mentioned he doesn't want to talk about a bubble, and the media is sort of taking it and running with it. They're going to have a bubble because they can't afford an AFC, NFC championship or a Super Bowl. So get ready. I think we're going to see something probably in mid to late January where teams are going to be stuck for, when I say stuck, they're going to be stuck wherever they are for a week or 2 or longer.
They don't want to end up with an AFC championship game, an NFC championship game, or a Super Bowl where you're missing major pieces of a team and it really affects the outcome. We'll see. There's obviously a lot of football left to be played, a lot of headlines left to be written. Thanks again for your time, Bill, and we'll talk to you again next week.
One thing, watch out for the Patriots. They're sneaking their way back into it. I know America doesn't want it, but I don't know. We'll see.
They've been pretty good teams in their last 3 weeks here.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. Thanks again.
Thanks to Bill. You can follow his coverage of the New England Patriots on Twitter at Burt Talks Sports. You can follow my coverage of the Indianapolis Colts at GM Bremer. Let's go take a look at a very busy week in the Big Ten now with Kevin Brockway of CNHI Sports Indiana and Elton Hayes of CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. Now we check in for our weekly spot with Kevin Brockway of CNHI Sports Indiana and Elton Hayes of CNHI Sports Pennsylvania. And guys, COVID remains a huge story in the Big Ten. Michigan, as we're filming right now, Michigan has just come down with news. They're not going to play Maryland on Saturday. Their game next week with Ohio State in question for any number of reasons, both sides of that equation right now. A little bit of chaos as the conference heads towards the championship game. I know, Kevin, people in Bloomington keeping a really close eye on this. What's the feeling down there right now, especially as word starts coming out that Barry Alvarez, the Wisconsin AD, says maybe the league needs to look at changing rules if Ohio State's not eligible for the championship game?
Well, Valerie Alvarez won't be making many friends in Bloomington with that decision. That statement, I think that, that was something that I think Indiana fans were kind of, hopeful for, counting on, even though they didn't beat Ohio State head to head. There is something to be said for the rule being set in the beginning of the season and making it through the season without any issues. And Indiana has done that. They've held up their end of the bargain in that, regard. They're 5-1 and they have, all 6 of those games are against division teams. So they would pretty much be a shoo-in to represent the East if Ohio State can't make it. So certainly, a situation that will be worth monitoring. And, Indiana hasn't won a Big Ten title since 1967, and they didn't even win that one outright. So this would certainly be an opportunity for the Hoosiers to play for and possibly win a title if, that was the case.
And Kevin, what's your take on this? Obviously not involved in this year's situation. We don't have to go too far back to when Ohio State and Penn State tied for the division. Penn State played in the Big Ten championship game, won the conference, and then it was Ohio State that went to the college football playoff. I'm sure people in Happy Valley still remember that fairly well.
They mention it. They bring it up every, I peruse the message boards every few days to just kind of get a pulse of the electorate, and that topic comes up without fail every couple of weeks. You see it.
So, what do you think the theory is about this situation? People feel like Ohio State gets preferential treatment. Is this going to make it even more so?
I think it would have to. I'm not usually the type to subscribe to tinfoil hat conspiracies, but if the Big Ten does come out and do this, then I think the rest of these programs have a valid gripe about this. It is showing preferential treatment and kind of taking care of the golden goose, and it's a bad look for the league. It really is. If like I said, that is to say, if all of this does come out and they give Ohio State, they bend the rules to make an exception for Ohio State, I think that fans and schools and athletic directors, will have a valid gripe about this situation if it happens.
And this leads to a question for both of you. Alvarez said this would be on the AD's plate, so this is something that they would have to be the ones that make the decision. Do you think among the 14 schools there would be enough votes? I mean, I sense both the athletic directors that you cover might be against this idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kevin, I'll let you take this one. I hogged the mic the last time. I'll let you take this one.
Well, yeah, I think Scott Dolson would definitely vote against it. You know what I mean? Because I think there has to be some reward for following the protocols. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? As unfortunate as it is, and there has been a randomness as to, well, I mean, look, if you're looking to blame someone, blame the Big Ten for not creating wiggle rooms in the schedules, and for this rapid testing not really working very well. I think that as they haven't been able to control the outbreaks among teams. And listen, it's happening everywhere, but the Big Ten billed itself as being the safest conference when they made this decision back in September. So there's a lot to spread around here, but I think the teams that have followed the protocols the best should get treatment, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I'm sure Jim Harbaugh would be maybe in Indiana's corner, maybe James Franklin, maybe those schools. So it'd be an interesting split, to say the least, and Northwestern as well, obviously.
I think you make a very good point when you mention kind of a built-in incentive. Across the league, we've seen different schools have handled this different ways. Penn State has been fortunate to be one of the programs that hasn't had a blip in its season. Indiana has been a program that's been fortunate. And I think there's something to be said for these programs, these players who have put in the work, who have made the sacrifices. And, this has been an unprecedented, there's that word we like again, unprecedented season. And I think these programs and these players who have worked hard to keep themselves eligible, their teams afloat, should be given some type of incentive for doing so.
Now, on the field, there's still a big game this week. Wisconsin and Indiana, as of the time that we're filming, still on schedule, still going to be played. The Hoosiers took a big loss. They won the game against Maryland on the field, but they lost their quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., for the rest of the year. Torn ACL for him, second time on the same knee. How big of a deal is this for Indiana, and what do you make of this matchup on Saturday with Wisconsin, Kevin?
Yeah, really unfortunate because, you take a look at Michael Penix, they were really trying to avoid those direct quarterback runs. He's going out of bounds, trying to avoid contact. It's his zone read play, and his ACL just pops and, got tackled from behind a little bit. So really tough break. The one thing I will say about Indiana is I think they're a more complete team than last year, obviously leading the FBS in interceptions with 16. They've got defense is really playing at a much higher level this year than last year. I think they can withstand it, and we'll see what Jack Tuttle has as far as the backup quarterback is concerned, a guy that was highly regarded, elite 11 quarterback, 4-star recruit coming out of high school, going to make his starting debut against Wisconsin this week. And, in talking to Indiana offensive coordinator Nick Sheridan, he says that, look, he can make a lot of the same throws that Penix can make. So, and Indiana's weapons around him. So I think that the overriding message for Tuttle, though, is to, try not to do too much and, just work within the framework of the offense and, hope that the rest of the team kind of elevates their game around him.
Elton, I know it's not your division, but what do you make of Northwestern's loss to Michigan State on Saturday as they try to gain some steam and get into the Big Ten championship game as well?
I mean, it was kind of a Northwestern thing to do, of all, and that's, I understand they're working with, rigorous academic standards, and they're working from behind they're working behind everyone else. But I wasn't surprised. I was more surprised to see them beat Wisconsin than I was to see Michigan State beat them. But with everything that's going on in the conference this year, a win against Michigan State would have really just, kind of maybe made them a shoo-in to get into Indianapolis if that's where it's going to be played this year. And to see them just fall apart, and the way they fell apart, their defense was kind of the calling card of this team, and to see the defense just wilt away and give up a lot of those explosive plays to the Michigan State quarterback and wide receiving core just was it. It was kind of to be expected of Northwestern.
Yeah, and the thing about Northwestern too is they don't have a lot of margin for error. 3 turnovers. Peyton Ramsey's been really good all season, but finally had a few turnovers in that game. And they're not a team that's talented enough to overcome a discrepancy in the turnover margin like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot still to be played out in the football on and off the field. We kind of covered that already. Basketball season underway. Struck me that the Big Ten has 3 teams in the top 5 right now, 4 in the top 10, and that 4th team, Michigan State, goes into Cameron Indoor. Granted, the Cameron Crazies were not there, but goes into Cameron Indoor this week and beats Duke on the road. How strong is this basketball conference potentially this year?
I think it's very strong. I'm excited this week for the Illinois-Baylor game. A top 10 matchup. We'll get to see what that talented Illinois defense. Talented Illinois duo can do against a very talented Baylor team. But when we did our Big Ten pages, I picked Illinois. I want to claim it now. I picked Illinois to win the conference. I know Iowa and Wisconsin get a lot of love, and rightfully so. But I've been very impressed with the way the Big Ten has started, and like you mentioned, for Michigan State to fall in that deficit early and to overcome that on the road at a place like Cameron without any fans. They had the cardboard fans were there, but it's still a daunting venue, and for them to just go out there without Cassius Winston this year was very impressive. But I think the Big Ten's off to a good start, and I think it can lay claim to being the best basketball conference in the country.
Yeah, and Indiana is off to a 3-1 start right now. They just beat, as we're taping this, they just beat Stanford 79-63 to take 3rd place in Maui. They did lose by 22 to Texas in an abysmal offensive performance, but obviously the inconsistency stretching a little bit into this year. But when they play well and they play connected, Indiana could be pretty good as well. I think they're. The main issue, though, is when they face those bigger athletic physical front lines like they did against Texas that can kind of take Trace Jackson-Davis out of his game. They have to find other ways to win. They have to shoot, which they haven't done a good job of, again, really this season. But Jackson-Davis had his way inside against Stanford, a career-high 31 points, much more assertive today, and really raised his level of play when Indiana needed it.
Well, absolutely. Very clear that there's plenty left to cover and plenty of news coming down from the conference. I'll let you guys get back to work. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you again next week.
Good seeing you guys as always.
All right, thank you.
Thanks to both Elton and Kevin for taking time out of their busy schedule right now. You can follow Elton and the Penn State Nittany Lions at EHDC12. You can follow Kevin and the Indiana Hoosiers at Kevin Brockway G1. Now let's get a national perspective and check in with Clay Horning. Now let's check in with our weekly spot with Clay Horning. And Clay, COVID's kind of become the overwhelming storyline in sports. It seems like you can't turn on any channel right now, not hear about games being canceled. I know there's a big kerfuffle we just talked about with the Big Ten guys in that conference and how they're going to play their championship game. It just seems like everything's a little off in the sports world right now. You kind of touched on that this week in your column. Can you talk about that a little bit? Some of the things that we're missing now in the sports world?
Yeah, there are so many directions to go with this, but it seemed like for, I don't know, a month or two, beginning with, the Big 12, SEC, ACC, that for the most part started around the same time, their football seasons. And you would get the off, like Baylor, their first game had to be moved, but there were all these idle weeks built into it. Things seemed to be going okay, but suddenly they're not. And just here where I am in Oklahoma, and I think it's just a symptom of something that's bigger nationwide. But here in Oklahoma, the women's basketball team opened its season on an afternoon. The men were to play later that night. That got canceled. The men did not play, nor did they play the SEC Challenge game that they were going to play against Florida. The women were supposed to go to South Dakota, play South Dakota. That they would have taken some losses. South Dakota, number 1, South Carolina, number 21, I think, Gonzaga. They didn't make that trip. This is also the week that the football team did not get its game. West Virginia game was postponed to the last possible open date, which is December 12th or December 12th, allowing for a December 19th Big 12 title game. But so now there's no more slack in the system, and they're scheduled to play. That was West Virginia that was moved to the 12th. They're scheduled to play Baylor at home this Saturday, and it's still scheduled. But if they're unable to play, it's not out of the woods yet. It's not entirely clear that they'll be able to. There's no place to put that game. And then what happens? And that just makes me think of the Steelers game that's bopped around all over the schedule. And, it's like you can turn – I find myself turning on the television, seeing the Maui event wherever the heck they're playing it on the mainland, which isn't the Maui event, but also then wondering, do I even care about these games? Because all of these teams could go 3 weeks without playing any game later in the season. And and we seem so close to a vaccine that's going to begin to be distributed, perhaps, certainly I think this month, some places. And it's just, I kind of just like, can we just wait? Can we just wait it out? I mean, hopefully none of us have to go on furlough if we wait it out, it's crazy. You don't even know what you're watching. And that just made me start to think about, so I miss, I miss the certainty of when folks are going to play. It looks like the NBA has its act together, but there aren't going to be any fans. At least here in Oklahoma City, there aren't, and anywhere else it would be very reduced. So everything is affected, and you can't seem to count on anything. And when I started thinking of that, I thought, well, if I can't count on basketball, I can't count on football. And the NHL, by the way, has no plan in place, and it should be playing too. If you can't count on anything, maybe I could watch something else. And then that just made me think of things as we just spoke about, like maybe I could watch some tennis. But why would I want to watch tennis? There hasn't been an American in the top 10 since Andy Roddick, at least among the men. So that's a lot to talk about. But it just it has me in this. It's taken me to this nostalgic place where you cared about things beyond baseball, basketball, football that are just not part of the national conversation any longer.
No doubt. And I wonder too, I mean, it's sort of in that kind of family of issues right now. How are we going to look at championships now? once they're determined. I feel like baseball got to a point people were wondering, is there a 60-game schedule, what it's going to look like? But the Dodgers won, and people kind of accept that because they were
they had a good playoff structure, and they were able. What if the Dodgers had not won Game 6? Would Justin Turner have caused the Dodgers to forfeit Game 7? But at any rate, we did get to this place where the playoffs made sense. People were able to field teams, and it worked. And maybe we'll get that with the NFL. But I don't think we're going to get that with college football because I'm sure there will be people in the western half of this country that are convinced that Southern Cal or Oregon ought to be, if you only let them play a season, they would have proved themselves. But you can't presume a team that's got 3 games under its belt belongs in the playoff. And the question will become, can you presume a team that's played 7 or 8 can versus a team that's played 10? And that's to be determined. But absolutely. I mean, this college football season, it's like it does seem like we're playing it the way we're playing it for the television money, so that big universities, so that they won't take the bath they would take if they weren't playing at all. And I don't. I mean, there are those who will take a very what's the word? I don't know, but they will take a very extreme view and say, and we're doing it on the backs of young athletes, primarily of color. For what purpose other than keeping it all afloat when you could just bring everybody back next year? And they have that option with the redshirt year the NCAA has offered. They could have all come back next year and having not played a season, but we got to play because there's money at stake. So if we can just get to a vaccine that's widely distributed, hopefully, closer to, the beginning of February or the beginning of January or February than March or April, we can, without anybody having been hurt too much or whatever, and we can just go, all right, well, I feel like I've now been talking for 5 or 10 minutes, and I've got there are no good answers. There are no good answers.
I feel like the college basketball season, you kind of alluded to it earlier. You play the Mountain Invitational in Asheville, North Carolina. You've got half teams across the country are not playing right now because they've got their own personal COVID issues. The other teams are playing wherever they can get a game. Notre Dame's coach was on Twitter earlier this week, literally asking anybody, hey, you want to play on December 4th or 5th? Give me a call. It feels like college basketball season is a car right now running downhill with no brakes. And
Colorado San Diego State game that on Thanksgiving Thursday, it became clear that Colorado was not going to be able to travel to LA to play Southern Cal. And on that Thursday, they made a deal with San Diego State to come to Folsom Field. That's insane. It's kind of, I salute their industriousness to pull it off, but that's just crazy. And so every time you're like, well, this didn't work out, so they're going to do this. And I don't know if somebody's explaining to me how they've overcome something to make something work, or just how idiotic it all seems, having done the things they're doing to make it work, and therefore devaluing any championship that will come at the end of the season or anything like that. So I don't know what we're going to think at the end of this. And I guess I'm mostly happy that somebody's playing. I mean, you have a team like Tulsa that is in the top 25 for the first time in forever, and so easily could have beaten Oklahoma State if you recall that game. So any game Tulsa can play, I'll watch if I'm free because I'm curious and I'm interested, and it's such a great story. Great stories are still great stories, but I want to say sort of to what end ? To just about anything that happens, because I think it's all economic, and and anyway, it's crazy.
There's no question about it. I'm with you. I think it's good that we have the chance to watch these games. We have a chance to tell these stories still. But it is an incredibly crazy time in the sports world. I don't think that's going to change over the next month. I think we're going to have plenty more to talk about on this subject. Thanks a lot for your time, Clay, and we'll talk to you again next week.
You bet. And I'll try to have something other than just this topic to talk about. But it's like a wave that has crashed over all of sports. And we survived for a little while, but now we're barely surviving, and you wonder what's worth it all. But anyway, yes, I'll see you next week.
Thanks again to our national columnist. You can follow him on Twitter @Clay Horning. And thanks again to all of you for watching. We'll catch up with you again next week.